The first thing Dante Vitale noticed was not an alarm or a warning light, but the way Cassandra Moreau's office glowed against the Chicago skyline at 6:45 in the evening. He had been watching her through the building's security feeds for 2 weeks, learning the rhythms of her days, and he knew she should have left an hour ago. But there she was, a silhouette of exhaustion behind glass and ambition working late again, while her enemies circled closer. And that was when he saw it, a microscopic discrepancy in the data stream flowing through the server room where he sat 42 floors below her corner office. A lag that lasted less than a second, a digital fingerprint that should not exist. Someone was inside her system. Dante sat in the climate-controlled server room, the air cold enough to bite at exactly 68 degrees. The space smelled faintly of ozone and expensive filtration systems. For 2 weeks, he had been living a lie so complete that sometimes he almost believed it himself. To everyone in this building, he was William Cross, an independent security contractor. A ghost who worked odd hours and never made small talk. But to the 300 men and women who answered to the Vitale name across Chicago, he was something else entirely. He was the Don, the youngest to ever hold the title. The man who had inherited a throne built on blood when his father had been executed in a restaurant 2 years ago, shot 3 times in the chest over linguine and red wine. Dante leaned back in the ergonomic chair, his dark eyes tracking the pale green text scrolling across the monitor. This job was supposed to be simple. Meridian Corporation was quietly laundering money for the Vitale family through a web of shell companies and offshore accounts. It had been set up years ago by a man named Gregory Thorne, who understood that the cleanest money looked exactly like legitimate profit. When Thorne died of a convenient heart attack, the pipeline became vulnerable. Dante had come to shore up the defenses to ensure federal auditors never asked the wrong questions. But this breach was not his operation. He pulled up the network traffic logs, tracing the intrusion path like a hunter following blood through snow. There, a proxy server was mirroring outbound traffic to an unauthorized external address. Someone was siphoning data from the executive drives. Not a bulk download that would trigger alarms, but a slow patient extraction. Professional work. Dante isolated the credentials. The access was registered to Lucian Ashford, the senior director of operations. A man whose ambition Dante had been watching carefully, whose smile never quite reached his eyes. But Lucian was not stealing general financial data. He was targeting something specific. Cassandra Moreau's personal directory. Something cold and sharp settled in Dante's chest. This was not Lorenzo's work. His underboss would not be this sloppy, which meant someone else was hunting in his territory. Dante checked his watch, 6:45. He had been sitting in this cold room for 2 weeks protecting a woman who did not know she needed protection from threats she did not know existed. And now someone had made their move. He stood up the motion, smooth and deliberate. The problem required physical intervention. The elevator ride to the top floor was a silent ascent. Dante watched his reflection in the polished doors. Faded gray t-shirt, dark jeans, heavy boots that made no sound. His face was angular, carved by genetics and a lifetime of calculated control. Dark hair that fell just slightly too long because William Cross, the contractor, was not the kind of man who cared about corporate grooming standards. But underneath the costume, Dante Vitale had ordered the death of 3 people in the last 2 years. Quick, clean executions. He did not enjoy violence. Never had. But his father had taught him that sentiment was a luxury that got you killed. The doors opened. He stepped into the executive suite where the lights were dimmed and the air smelled of leather and wood polish and expensive decisions. He walked past empty desks until he reached the corner office at the end of the hall. The door was open. Cassandra Moreau sat behind her massive oak desk, the city spreading behind her like a kingdom of light. She was leaning back in her chair, one knee crossed over the other, exhaustion written in the set of her shoulders despite the perfect posture. Crisp white blouse, sharp black skirt. A woman who had built her armor so well she sometimes forgot she was wearing it. Dante had been watching her for 2 weeks, not with clinical surveillance, but because he could not help it. Because every time she walked past his domain in the basement, something in him shifted. A recognition he could not name and refused to examine. She looked up from her laptop. When she saw him, something flickered behind her professional mask. Amusement, maybe. Or curiosity about the ghost from the basement finally appearing in her world. "William," she said, her voice low and melodic, "to what do I owe the pleasure of a visit from the basement ghost?" Dante stayed at the threshold. The data leak was active. Every second he stood here, more files were compiling in whatever shadow folder Lucian Ashford was using. But he could not simply tell her to step away. One wrong move and the malware might trigger a deletion protocol. "I need access to your terminal," he said, his voice flat and devoid of urgency. Right now. She arched an eyebrow, fingers tapping a silver pen against her desk. Right now, I'm finalizing the quarterly projections for tomorrow's board meeting. The one where Lucien is undoubtedly going to argue that my department is bleeding capital. Right now, Dante repeated, and you need to stop typing. She sighed a sound of supreme fatigue and set the pen down. She looked at him, really looked at him, her gaze tracing the plain cotton of his shirt, the relaxed set of his shoulders, the way he stood completely still, like a man with all the time in the world and none of it. Dante checked his watch, 6:50. He made a decision, a strategic test to read her character under pressure. I have a hard out at 7, he said deliberately. I have a date. It was not a date. It was a scheduled call with Lorenzo. But the word hung heavy in the air, and Dante watched Cassandra's reaction the way gamblers watch cards being dealt. She stopped leaning back. She shifted forward, planting her elbows on the desk, resting her chin on steepled fingers. A slow smile curved her lips, playful and challenging. She tilted her head and her eyes met his with directness that felt like a physical touch. Is she prettier than I am? The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. The hum of the city seemed to fade. Dante felt a sudden tightening at the base of his skull. Not simple attraction, recognition, the weight of an anchor dropping into deep water. He did not smile, did not deflect. He held her gaze while his mind cataloged everything. The way her knee bounced once under the desk before she stilled it. The click of her nails on the armrest keeping an uneven rhythm. The way her breathing shallowed when she mentioned Lucien's name. She was good at hiding pressure, but Dante had spent his life reading people the way others read maps. She doesn't exist, Dante said quietly. Then he stepped into the room. Step away from the desk, Cassandra. The use of her first name broke the spell. Her smile faltered, replaced by sharp clarity. She recognized authority when she heard it. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, and stepped aside. Dante moved to her chair. The leather still held her warmth. He leaned over the desk, hands moving across the keyboard in rapid command line shortcuts, bringing up hidden directory trees. What is it? She asked her voice dropping to a serious tone. She stood close to his shoulder, not touching, but close enough that he sensed the stillness of her breathing. Someone is executing a packet capture on your machine, Dante explained, fingers moving in precise bursts. They're mirroring your personal directory to an external server. Zero-day exploit, piggybacking on the update service. My personal directory. Her voice tightened. William, my restructuring drafts are in there. My performance reviews of Lucien's team. If he gets that, I know, that's why I'm killing the port. He input the command and hit enter. The screen flashed black, then returned to her spreadsheet. The outbound data flow dropped to 0. Did they get it? She asked, something raw creeping into her voice. Dante pulled up the logs. Fragments, encrypted blocks, hours to compile into anything readable. He stood and faced her. But the security protocol is strict. Now that I've severed the connection manually, we're locked in. We have to rebuild the encryption keys from scratch, or the system purges your drive at midnight. She stared at him. You're saying we're trapped here until we fix it. How long? Until it's done. He looked at the clock. 6:55. Cancel your plans. The date is off. She did not argue, did not demand explanations. She simply nodded her shoulders, dropping an inch as she accepted reality. That was what made Dante respect her. She did not waste energy fighting immutable systems. What do you need me to do? Nothing. Stay out of the way. Dante commandeered her secondary monitor, turning it vertical to read code more efficiently. Cassandra retreated to the leather sofa, working offline on her speech notes. The silence between them settled into something functional. The only sounds were his rapid keystrokes and her soft rustling of papers. Hours passed, the building emptied around them. The cleaning crews came and went. Outside, Chicago glittered like promises and threats in equal measure. Around 9:30, the adrenaline faded, leaving exhaustion and hunger. Dante rubbed his neck, feeling tension knot his spine. He had not eaten since noon. You stopped typing, Cassandra noted without looking up, running a decryption algorithm. 12 minutes to brute force the hash. We wait. She closed her laptop and stood stretching unselfconsciously. I'm ordering food, Thai or Greek, whatever is fast. Thai it is. When the food arrived at 10, Cassandra unpacked containers at the conference table. She slid a box of pad Thai toward Dante without handing him a fork. He paused, looking at her. She watched him with a knowing smile. You noticed, he said, 2 weeks ago, break room. You saw what I ordered. She took a bite, then set her fork down. Most people don't pay attention to things like that. I pay attention to everything, Dante said quietly, as much truth as he could afford. They ate in comfortable silence. Then Cassandra spoke again, her voice softer. If he decrypts those files before morning, my career here is over. Not just the restructuring. My personal notes are in there. Doubts about the CEO, my own anxieties. If Lucien leaks that, they won't just deny my promotion. They'll ask for my resignation. Dante stopped eating. He looked at her hands gripped together, saw the tremor in her fingers. He did not offer empty reassurances. He gave her concrete fact. He won't decrypt them, Dante stated with absolute calm. She looked up, eyes bright with stress. How can you be sure? Because I am better than whoever he hired to build his script. Not arrogance, objective measurement. His code is sloppy, relies on generic libraries. My encryption is bespoke, built specifically for this architecture. He would need a quantum processor and 10 years to break it. He has neither. She held his gaze. The panic hovering at her edges began to recede, replaced by profound stillness. The transfer of stability was palpable, as if he had physically steadied her. She picked up her fork. Okay, she breathed, one word carrying the weight of a surrendered burden. They finished eating. Cassandra cleared containers with practiced ease. Dante returned to the terminal, eyes burning as he rebuilt registry keys line by line. By midnight, fatigue pressed down like physical weight. Cassandra had curled on the sofa, suit jacket draped over her shoulders like a blanket, breathing evening into sleep's rhythm. Dante paused for exactly 5 seconds. In the monitor's dim light, she looked fragile yet resilient. Strong enough to survive a world designed to break her, vulnerable enough to fall asleep in front of a stranger because exhaustion gave no choice. He felt a sharp ache in his chest, gravity urging him to walk over and adjust her jacket, ensure she was warm and safe. Dante kept his hands on the keyboard. He forced focus back to the screen. Restraint was not punishment. It was discipline. The difference between wanting and taking, between feeling and acting. The things he wanted most were the things that could destroy him if he reached for them. The best way to protect her was not to hover while she slept. It was to ensure that when she woke, her enemies had no weapons left. At 2 in the morning, the progress bar hit 100%. The system locked the new encryption keys. The data leak was contained. The stolen packets on Lucien's server were rendered permanently inert, corrupted, useless. Dante ran a script to wipe Lucien's logs, leaving fragmented garbage. Then he planted a tracer that would alert him the moment Lucien accessed the files and realized he had been beaten. Before waking, Cassandra, Dante built the paper trail. Firewall logs copied offline, timestamped, encrypted with his signature. Each compromised file given a digital fingerprint proving exactly when and how the breach occurred. Everything documented with precision that would survive boardroom or courtroom scrutiny. He walked to the night security supervisor's desk. The man looked up, startled. I need you to witness a timestamp, Dante said, placing documents on the desk. The supervisor signed, added date, and time. Watched Dante seal everything into a manila envelope. Dante drafted a single-line email to the CEO's assistant, scheduled for 6 a.m. Security incident contained. Formal briefing at 8:30. Evidence on hand, no speeches, just facts. When Dante returned, Cassandra stirred. She sat up slowly, rubbing her face hair falling from its arrangement. Is it done? She asked, voice rough with sleep. It's done. Your drive is secure. Lockdown lifts at 6. She looked at the clock, then him. You stayed awake the entire time. That was the job. No, she said, voice gaining strength, authority returning, but tempered with something softer. The job was to log it and report to IT. You bypassed protocol to fix it yourself. You stayed. Dante had no defense. It was true. He could have documented and walked away clean. But he had not. He gathered his jacket. Get some sleep, Cassandra. You have a board meeting in 6 hours. She stood, smoothing her skirt, trying to reassemble her professional self. But her eyes lingered on him with an unasked question. William, she started, then stopped. Dante waited, hand on the doorframe, giving her space to decide. Thank you, she finally said. Not perfunctory corporate thanks. Something real that cost her to say. Dante nodded once. Then he walked out, down silent corridors, into the elevator, carrying him back to the basement where he belonged. As the elevator descended, he pulled out his phone. 2 messages. First from Lorenzo, sent at midnight. Status update. Dante typed, handled. The second arrived as he pocketed the phone. Encrypted notification only a handful could send. Short, direct, turning everything more complicated. Lorenzo Konstantin Volkov's man inside is Lucien Ashford. He's hunting proof of our pipeline. If he gets it, war begins. Dante stared at the message. His pulse stayed steady, breathing controlled, but cold clarity settled over him. The feeling before violence, before calculated decisions that could not be unmade. Lucien was not just corporate sabotage. He was working for Konstantin Volkov. The hack was reconnaissance. Konstantin testing boundaries, searching for proof to bring the Vitali family to its knees. And Cassandra Moreau stood directly in the crossfire of a war she did not know was being fought. Dante stepped into the server room. Cold air hit like baptism. He sat at his terminal and began searching files he had not intended to access. If Lucien worked for Constantine, Dante needed to know everything. Not just tonight's theft, but what Lucien had been hunting. What he already knew. What he suspected. The search took 30 minutes. When results compiled, Dante felt cold inevitability settle like a shroud. Lucien had been systematically accessing archived financial records dating back 7 years. Old ledgers, transaction histories, shell companies, everything Gregory Thorne had built, everything tying Meridian to the Vitali family's laundering operation. Buried in those files, encrypted but not invisible, was evidence that would bring down not just Dante, but every captain, every soldier, every legitimate business the family had built over decades. One leak, one tip to federal authorities, and it would all burn. Dante closed the window and leaned back. Outside, dawn's first light bled across the skyline. In 6 hours, Cassandra would walk into that board meeting confident the crisis was over. But Dante knew better. The crisis had only been postponed, and the choice haunting him since his father died was sharper than ever. He could complete the mission, secure the pipeline, eliminate the threat, walk away with territory intact and reputation unquestioned, or he could protect the woman upstairs. The woman who had asked if his date was Prettier, who had trusted him enough to sleep in his presence, who represented everything he had never allowed himself to want because wanting meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant death. He could not have both. His phone buzzed. Lorenzo board meeting at 8:30. Be ready, this is not over. Dante typed back, I know. Then he turned off the phone completely. Not just the screen, but the power, the connection, the invisible tether to every obligation and order that came with being Dante Vitali. For the next few hours, he was no one. Just a man in a cold room, watching the sun rise over a city that had never cared about his name or title. Just a man who had made a choice without fully understanding what it would cost. And as light grew stronger, Dante allowed himself one moment of weakness, one concession to the human part he had spent years burying. He thought about the way Cassandra smiled when she asked if his date was Prettier, the way she fell asleep trusting him, the way she said thank you like it meant something. And for the first time in 2 years, Dante Vitali wondered if there was a version of his life where he could walk away from the throne and still be alive at the end of it. The boardroom on the 44th floor was designed to intimidate. Mahogany paneling climbing to 14-foot ceilings. A table so long and polished, it reflected the faces of 20 board members whose combined wealth could buy small nations. Windows framing Chicago like a painting of empire. Dante sat in the back row, deliberately invisible. Same gray shirt and jeans from the night before. A stark contrast to the bespoke suits filling the room. He was here as William Cross security contractor required to give a quarterly network report. 3 minutes of jargon no one would hear. His real purpose was watching Lucien Ashford's plan collapse. Cassandra stood at the table's head. She looked flawless. Exhaustion erased, replaced by radiant competence. Hair pulled into a sleek twist. Charcoal suit sharp enough to cut. She had rebuilt her armor overnight and it fit perfectly. Dante watched her outline projections with surgical precision, felt something tighten in his chest. This was the version the world saw. Confident. Untouchable. A woman who had clawed to the executive suite and would defend it with everything. But he had seen the other version, the woman who fell asleep with her jacket as a blanket, who asked if his date was Prettier, i.e., bright with something between flirtation and vulnerability. He knew both were real. Lucien Ashford sat halfway down the table. Mid-40s spray booth, tan confidence from never being truly challenged. Expensive suit, Swiss watch smile like a sharpened weapon. He waited for his moment. When Cassandra brought up budget cuts, Lucien struck. If I may, Cassandra, his voice dripped, false concern. He opened a manila folder with deliberate slowness. The board should be aware your judgment might be compromised. The room stilled. Every head turned. I received an anonymous data dump last night. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket, holding it like trial evidence. Your personal files. Drafts showing targeted bias against my department. Highly unprofessional remarks about the CEO's leadership. Low murmurs rippled. The CEO frowned. Cassandra's face stayed composed, but Dante saw tension in her shoulders the way her hand tightened around the clicker. She did not look at Dante, did not flinch. She set the clicker down with a soft click that carried more weight than Lucien's performance. An anonymous data dump, Lucien. Very serious. I have the files. He slid the drive toward the CEO. IT should decrypt this immediately. Transparency is paramount. Cassandra met the CEO's gaze calmly. I welcome review. However, William Santos, our security contractor, should handle the drive. Chain of custody for corporate espionage. She used a different name. Not Cross. Santos? A deliberate signal. The CEO nodded. Proceed. Dante stood, the room silenced as he walked forward. He looked exactly like what he pretended, a technician with no stake in politics. He picked up the flash drive. Light, insignificant. Connected it to the presentation laptop mirroring to the projector. The drive mounted, files appeared. Lucien leaned back, smug smile settling like victory. Dante clicked the first file. Chaotic alphanumeric strings filled the screen. Corrupted data. He clicked the next. More corruption. Ran a diagnostic command scrolling in rapid succession. The room watched in silence. This drive contains shattered hash fragments, Dante stated, voice carrying cleanly. No emotion, pure fact. Data is unreadable, corrupted at source. He paused, letting words settle. Furthermore, metadata indicates illicit scraping from an internal node using unauthorized packet sniffing. Node registered to Lucien Ashford's credentials. Silence shifted from tense to lethal. Lucien's smile vanished, replaced by pale panic. Impossible. The script was flawless. Someone tampered. Yes, Cassandra cut through like a blade. She pulled documents from her portfolio. Someone did. I authorized William to perform a security audit last night after detecting your intrusion. You didn't receive a whistleblower about Lucienation. You executed corporate espionage against a fellow executive and failed. She tossed documents onto the table. Soft impact, absolute finality. And for complete transparency, I brought hard copies of my actual restructuring proposal, based on metrics, not bias. Lucien looked around, searching for allies. Found only cold stares. The CEO pointed at the door. My office, Lucien, now. As Lucien gathered his things in defeat, Cassandra stood tall, did not gloat, simply reclaimed her space. Her eyes found Dante's for 3 seconds. Professional mask in place for the board, but in micro-expressions, in the slight softening of her mouth, in the steady calm, she spoke directly to him. Thank you. Dante nodded once, then walked out before congratulations began. His job was done, at least William Cross's job. But Dante Vitale's work had just become infinitely more complicated. The warehouse on the south side smelled like diesel and old concrete, one of a dozen properties the Vitale family owned through shell company layers. Lorenzo waited in the back office, cigarette burning between fingers, despite supposedly quitting 5 years ago. Dante walked in without knocking. Lorenzo looked up, weathered face, unreadable in dim light from a single bulb. You handled it, Lorenzo said, not a question. I handled it. Lucien suspended, CEO preparing termination. Long drag ember flaring orange. Constantine won't be happy. Constantine can file a complaint. Lorenzo did not smile. This isn't a joke, Dante. Lucien was Constantine's eyes. Now he's burned. Constantine will escalate. Then we'll be ready. Ready how? Lorenzo leaned forward, voice dropping to the rasp that meant unwelcome truth coming. Evidence is neutralized now, but Meridian's still vulnerable. We need full control. Not protection. Control. Dante kept his face neutral, knowing where this led. What are you suggesting? Cassandra Moreau signs over majority shares to our acquisition company. Hostile takeover, Masters merger. We install our people, control the records. Constantine has nothing left to hunt. She'll never agree. She doesn't need to agree. She needs to comply. Lorenzo stubbed the cigarette with force. You've been inside 2 weeks. Built rapport. She trusts you. Make it happen. Dante felt familiar weight settling over his shoulders. Burden of expectations. But underneath, something new building. Resistance. Dangerous kind. Give me time, Dante said carefully. You have 1 week. Either she signs or I send someone else. And they won't be gentle. Not a threat. Statement of fact. So, Lorenzo was loyal, but loyalty had limits defined by survival. If Dante could not secure Meridian, someone else would. Someone who would not care if Cassandra became collateral damage. Dante left without another word, sat in his car 5 minutes, hands on steering wheel, staring at nothing, then pulled out his phone. Text to Mateo, I need to talk. Response, 30 seconds later. Usual place, 20 minutes. The diner existed in every city. Red vinyl booths, coffee brewed during the previous administration, jukebox playing only pre-millennium songs. Mateo was already there when Dante arrived, sitting in the back booth with coffee and an unread newspaper. Mateo Reyes was 31, a public defender, working 80 hours weekly for a salary barely covering student loans. Grew up 3 blocks from Dante before gentrification turned corner stores into craft breweries. Friends since 12. One of 2 people who knew Dante the person, not Dante the Don. Dante slid into the booth. Mateo looked up, expression shifting from casual to concerned in a heartbeat. You look like hell, Mateo said. Haven't slept. That's not what I mean. He folded the newspaper. You look like you're carrying something heavy. Dante ordered coffee, waited for the waitress to leave. I met someone. Mateo's eyebrows rose. Someone? A woman, Cassandra, executive at the company. The cover job. Yeah. Mateo studied Dante's face with cross-examination intensity. And she doesn't know who I am, what I am, thinks I'm just a contractor fixing her security. Dante wrapped hands around the coffee cup when it arrived, letting heat ground him. Lorenzo wants me to force her into signing over her company, protect our interest. But you don't want to. No. The word hung between them, simple and absolute. Mateo was quiet, then careful. How long have you been looking for a way out, Dante? Since my father died. 2 years. I know how long it's been. Then you know people like you don't just walk away. Families don't give exit interviews and retirement parties. I'm aware. Dante drank. Terrible coffee, exactly what he needed. But maybe this is the opening. If I can neutralize Constantine without destroying Cassandra, prove the threats contained without needing full Meridian control, then maybe Lorenzo lets you retire to a beach and live happily ever after. Gentle but firm. Dante, listen to yourself. You're the Don. 300 people depend on you. You can't quit because you caught feelings. It's not just feelings. Dante met his eyes. First time in my life someone's looked at me and seen just a person. Not the name, not the power, not what I can do or what they should fear. Just Mauricio. Mateo was quiet longer. Finally sighed. Then tell her the truth, before this gets deeper. Because if she finds out later, won't matter how you feel or she feels. Betrayal will destroy whatever you're building. Dante knew Mateo was right, but knowing and acting were separated by a chasm he was not sure he could cross. His phone buzzed. Unknown number, thank you for this morning. Dinner tonight I owe you. 8 p.m. from Cassandra. Must have gotten his number from contractor files. Mateo leaned to see the screen. That her? Yeah. What are you going to do? Dante typed before he could reconsider. I'll be there. Hit send, looked up at Mateo. Going to see where this goes. If it means burning everything else, then that's what I'll do. Mateo shook his head slowly, something like respect in his expression. Either the bravest man I know, or the most foolish. Probably both. The restaurant was too bright, too loud, too full of people laughing easily without checking exits. But Cassandra chose it. When Dante arrived at 8, she was seated by the window, backlit by city lights, like she belonged in a painting. She stood when she saw him. Something different now. Corporate armor gone, simple black dress, elegant without trying. Hair loose around shoulders instead of severe twist. Younger, softer. More the woman who slept on the couch than the executive who destroyed Lucien before the board. Hi, she said, single syllable carrying weight. Hi. They sat. First minutes careful, tentative. Small talk testing, waters before diving deep. Food, weather, corporate, politics, absurdity. But gradually as the meal progressed and wine poured, walls came down. Cassandra told him about pressure of living up to her mentor's legacy. Gregory Thorne, who built Meridian from nothing, saw something in her when she was just a junior analyst, with too much ambition and not enough connections. Talked about loneliness at the top, how success cost friendships because people either wanted something or were intimidated by what she had become. Dante listened, found himself sharing things he had never told anyone except Mateo. Not truth, but close enough to feel real. About being raised by his uncle after parents died. Learning early the world divided into people who took what they wanted and people who let it be taken. The isolation of being the one people turned to for solutions, the weight of responsibility when you were barely holding yourself together. You sound like you've been carrying that weight a long time, Cassandra said softly. Longer than I care to admit. Do you ever think about just walking away, starting over, where no one knows your name? Dante met her eyes. The question landed like a confession. Every day. Something passed between them, recognition beyond words. Both trapped in lives they had not entirely chosen. Both wearing masks so familiar they forgot their real faces. When they left, Dante walked Cassandra to her car in the dimly lit parking garage, echoing with distant traffic. She turned to face him back against the driver's door question. In her eyes, she did not ask aloud. Dante took one step closer, close enough to see her breath catch. He raised one hand, placed it on the door beside her head. Not trapping, creating space that belonged only to them. Cassandra, he said, her name weighted with all he could not say. She reached up, caught the front of his shirt, fingers curling into fabric, not pulling closer but holding in place, making sure he did not retreat. William, she whispered, and he hated she called him a name that was not his. Dante leaned down. The kiss was not hurried or desperate, deliberate, careful, question asked with lips and breath instead of words. When Cassandra answered, rising on her toes to meet him halfway, it felt like the most honest thing Dante had done in years. No urgency, no frantic consumption. A promise made without ink. Mutual acknowledgement that something had shifted, something that could not be taken back. Dante felt tension bleed from her shoulders, felt her exhale steadying as they parted. She looked up, eyes bright and clear. I don't usually do this. Neither do I. I mean it. I don't let people in. Easier that way. I know. Dante brushed hair from her face, gesture so natural it felt like muscle memory for a life never lived. But sometimes the easy way is the wrong way. Cassandra smiled, the kind that could remake a world. Tomorrow, dinner again. Tomorrow, Dante agreed, though Lorenzo's one-week deadline ticked like a bomb. He watched her drive away, taillights disappearing into Chicago night, felt the weight of his choices settling like a shroud. The next days blurred in mounting pressure. Lucian terminated on day 4, access revoked, office cleaned, while he stood in the lobby making empty legal threats. But victory felt hollow because Dante knew what Cassandra did not. Lucian's termination would not end this, would only force Constantine to adapt. Day 5, first cracks appeared. Financial reporters asking questions about Meridian's historical accounting. Small articles buried in business sections easily dismissed as routine diligence. But Dante recognized the pattern. Someone laying groundwork, planting doubt seeds that could cultivate into full investigation if given time and pressure. That evening, Dante broke into Meridian's archive server room. Not difficult. He had built enough backdoors during legitimate access that getting in unseen was routine. 4 hours combing old records, transaction logs, shell registries, everything Gregory Thorne built before his convenient heart attack. He copied files to an encrypted drive, wiped every trace of his presence. When he left Meridian that night, he carried proof that could save Cassandra or destroy her, depending on who saw it first. Day 6, Matteo called at noon. You need to hear something. Friend in FBI's Organized Crime Division. They're building a case on Konstantin Volkov, 18 months. And your name came up, not as target, but person of interest. They know you're Don of the Vitale family, Dante. They're watching. Should have triggered panic. Instead, strange, distant calm. Let them watch, Dante said. Are you insane if they connect you to Meridian? They won't. I'm careful. Careful doesn't matter if Constantine burns you out of spite. He knows you're protecting something at Meridian. He'll figure it's not just business. Matteo was right. The clock was not just ticking on Lorenzo's deadline. It was ticking on everything. That night, Dante's phone rang at 11. Lorenzo's name. We need to talk. In person. Now. Dante met him at the warehouse. Lorenzo was not alone. 2 soldiers stood in shadows. Insurance, reminder that Lorenzo's patience had limits. 1 week is up, Lorenzo said. Where are we with Cassandra Moreau? I'm working on it. That's not an answer. Only answer I have right now. Lorenzo lit a cigarette flame, casting harsh shadows. I had her investigated, Dante. Deep background. Know what I found? Dante said nothing. Her father was Michael Hartman, federal prosecutor in the 90s. He put away 3 dons before retiring. Gallo, Benedetti, Russo. Remember what happened? They died in prison. That's right. And if Cassandra learns what you really are, if she finds out you're Dante Vitale, and you've been lying 3 weeks, what you think she'll do? Think she'll protect you, she'll destroy you. Just like her father destroyed everyone who trusted him. Words meant to wound. They found their mark. Something cold and heavy settled in Dante's stomach. She's not her father. No worse. True believer. actually thinks the world divides into good and bad people, knows which side she's on. Lorenzo stepped closer. You're falling for her. I can see it. And it's going to get you killed. I can handle this. Can you? From where I'm standing, looks like you're throwing away everything your father built for a woman who'd turn you in the second she knew truth. My father built a prison, Dante said, voice colder than intended. Life where every decision is fear and every relationship is transactional. Maybe I don't want that anymore. Lorenzo stared, something like sadness crossing his face. Finish this. Get Cassandra to sign Secure Meridian Survive. Then maybe in a few years, when things are stable, you can think about retirement. But not now, not like this. Lorenzo left. Dante stood alone in the empty warehouse, feeling 2 years of grief and obligation crushing down. Next morning, day 7, Dante found Cassandra in her office before sunrise. She was crying. Not dramatic sobbing, but quiet, exhausted tears from being pushed past breaking. Financial news running stories. Meridian under investigation for accounting irregularities. Anonymous sources suggesting fraud, embezzlement, organized crime connections. All speculation, nothing concrete, but damage done. Board calling emergency meeting that afternoon. Implication, clear, Cassandra would be asked to resign. She looked up when Dante entered, saw him try to put her mask back on. Don't, Dante said softly. You don't have to pretend with me. Mask crumbled. I don't know how to fix this. Lucienne's gone, but somehow it's worse. Someone's targeting me and I don't know why. Dante crossed and knelt before her chair, taking her hands. Cold, trembling, slightly. Listen to me. I'm going to end this. All of it. Find who's behind this and stop them. How you're a security contractor. You can't. Trust me. One more day. That's all I need. Can you give me that? She searched his face, looking for something to hold on to, reason to believe this nightmare would end. Who are you really, William? Because sometimes when I look at you, I see someone who knows how to navigate a world I don't even understand. Dante wanted to tell her everything. Confess his name was not William. He was not just a contractor. The danger she faced was real and immediate and directly connected to him. But words stuck because he knew what would happen. She would look at him the way people looked at monsters. Whatever fragile thing they had built would shatter beyond repair. So instead, he lied. One more time. I'm someone who cares about you more than I should, and I'm going to protect you, I promise. She leaned forward and kissed him, desperate and scared and trusting. Dante felt the weight of his promise settle like a debt he might not be able to repay. When he left, he made a phone call to a number he had sworn never to use. Line connected after 2 rings. This is Dante Vitale. I need a meeting with Konstantin Volkov tonight. Neutral ground, just me and him. A voice on the other end paused. You sure, boss? I'm sure. Set it up. Dante hung up and walked to the elevator. In 12 hours, everything would change. Either he would find a way to end this without destroying Cassandra, or he would lose everything trying. But as the elevator descended, carrying him away from the woman who had become his reason for wanting to be better, Dante realized he had already made his choice. He was going to save her. Even if it cost him his throne. Even if it cost him his life. Some things were worth burning the world for. The meeting place was a warehouse on the industrial district's edge. Building abandoned so long, even graffiti artists stopped caring. Concrete floors stained with decades of oil and rust. Windows broken like missing teeth. Smell of decay and standing water. Dante arrived first, exactly as planned. Parked 3 blocks away, walked the rest. Tenant night, neighborhood deserted, except for occasional semis rumbling past on the highway overpass. He stood in the warehouse center under a single flickering light hanging from a chain. Waited. Matteo had given him the wire 2 hours earlier. Professional-grade recording device small enough to hide under his shirt, powerful enough to capture every word within 20 feet. Equipment prosecutors used to build RICO cases. That destroyed criminal empires, one recorded conversation at a time. You understand what you're doing, Matteo had said. Not a question. Once you turn this on, get Constantine on tape, there's no going back. FBI will use this. They'll come for everyone. I know. You're willing to risk that, burn your own family. Dante had looked at his oldest friend and told the truth. I'm willing to burn everything if it means she stays safe. Now standing with the wire pressed against his chest, Dante felt that decision's weight settling into his bones. This was the moment where everything changed, where Dante Vitale Don of Chicago became something else entirely. Traitor, turncoat, man who chose love over loyalty. He heard cars before he saw them. 3 black SUVs pulling up headlights, cutting through darkness like searchlights. Doors opened, Men emerged, soldiers in dark suits with faces that had seen violence so often it no longer registered as remarkable. Then Konstantin Volkov stepped from the middle vehicle. 56 silver hair swept back from a face carved from granite. Expensive suit, expensive watch. Man who had built an empire on calculated brutality and never lost sleep over bodies left behind. Konstantin walked in alone confidence, either brave or stupid. Soldiers remained outside shadows against headlights. Dante Vitale, Konstantin said, accent thick with Moscow and old grudges. The young Don. Finally we meet face to face. You asked for this meeting. What do you want? What I want. Konstantin smiled like a shark tasting blood. I want what your father took from me 20 years ago. Respect. Territory. Acknowledgement that the Volkov family is not some minor inconvenience you can ignore. My father's dead. Whatever grudge you had ends now. Does it? Konstantin stepped closer. Your father killed my brother. Shot him in the head over waterfront access dispute. You think I forget? You think I forgive? Dante had not known that detail, had not known the depth of hatred Konstantin carried like sacred text, but he kept his face neutral, breathing steady. This isn't about my father. This is about Meridian Corporation. You sent Lucien Ashford to steal evidence. You're trying to expose the money laundering. Trying? Konstantin laughed. I already have what I need. Lucien gave me files before your contractor trick corrupted them. Copies, backups, evidence tying your family to 7 years of financial crimes. The wire was recording. Every word. Then why are we talking? If you have evidence, why not just send it to the FBI? Because evidence is only valuable if you know how to use it. I don't want you in prison, Dante. I want you under my control. Konstantin pulled a folded document from his jacket. Sign over Meridian Corporation to my shell company. Give me full access to your laundering pipeline. I'll keep evidence locked away. You stay free, family stays operational. We become partners. And if I refuse, then I send everything to federal authorities. You, Lorenzo, every captain and soldier. You'll all die in prison just like Gallo Benedetti Russo, just like the men Cassandra Moreau's father put away. There it was, threat wrapped in silk. Offer that was really an ultimatum. Dante looked at the document, looked at the man who had killed his father now trying to steal everything his family built. Felt something cold and final settle. You know what the problem is with men like you, Konstantin? You think everyone is for sale. You think loyalty and honor are just words people use when they haven't been offered enough money. And you're different. No, I'm exactly the same. That's why I know you're lying. Konstantin's smile faded. Careful, boy. You don't have copies. Lucien was sloppy. Got fragments, corrupted data, nothing holding up in court. You're bluffing, hoping I'll panic and sign without asking questions. You're wrong. Am I? Then prove it. Show me the evidence. Konstantin's hand moved toward his jacket. For a moment, Dante thought he had miscalculated, thought the man was reaching for a gun. But instead, Konstantin pulled out his phone, scrolled, held up the screen. Financial documents, transaction logs, shell company registries, everything proving the Vitale family's involvement in Meridian. The wire was still recording. You see, I have everything. Every transaction, every payment, every dirty dollar that passed through that company. Unless you sign right now, FBI gets it all by morning. Dante looked at the phone, looked at evidence that could destroy him, then did something Konstantin would never expect. He smiled. You're right. You have everything you need to bury me. But here's what you don't have. You don't have leverage over Cassandra Moreau. The woman is irrelevant. Is she? Because from where I'm standing, the only reason you care about Meridian is you want to hurt me, want revenge for your brother. Best way to hurt me is destroy the woman I care about. Konstantin's eyes narrowed. You're in love with her. Yes. Then you're a fool. She'll never forgive you when she learns what you are. Probably right, but that's my problem, not yours. Dante stepped closer. Here's my offer. You want Meridian, fine, take it. I'll convince Cassandra to sign over shares. You get full control of the pipeline. But you leave her alone, no threats, no retaliation. She walks away clean, you never touch her. And what do you get? I get to know she's safe, that's enough. Konstantin studied him long, finally nodded. You have 48 hours to make it happen. If Cassandra Moreau signs over Meridian, we have a deal. If not, I destroy you both. Understood. Konstantin turned to leave, paused at the doorway. Your father died because he got soft, because he thought about retiring instead of fighting. Don't make the same mistake, Dante. Men like us don't get Happy endings. Maybe not, but at least I'll die trying. Constantine left. SUVs pulled away, taillights disappearing. Dante stood alone, hand pressed against the wire, feeling every recorded word's weight. He pulled out his phone and called Matteo. Did you get it? Every word. Constantine confessed to blackmail, extortion, conspiracy to commit corporate sabotage. It's enough. Enough for what? Enough to end this. Lunch. The final board meeting was scheduled for 8:30 morning. Dante arrived at 7 buildings, still quiet, executive floors empty except for early risers and people who never learned how to sleep. Straight to the server room, began uploading files. Evidence he had collected over the past week. Wire recording from last night. Proof that Lucien Ashford had been working for Konstantin Volkov, that the entire attack on Cassandra was orchestrated by a man who wanted revenge against the Vitali family. 90 minutes to compile everything into a presentation, making sense to people who did not speak code and conspiracy. 90 minutes cross-referencing, timestamps, encrypting files, building an airtight case. When done, Dante sat back and looked at what he had created. Truth laid out in clean lines and irrefutable data. Kind of truth that would destroy Konstantin Volkov and save Cassandra Moreau. But it would also expose Dante. Because buried in those files, hidden in shell transactions and offshore accounts, was evidence of the Vitali family's money laundering. Once the board saw it, understood the full scope of what Meridian had been used for, they would have no choice but to turn it over to federal authorities. Dante would lose everything. Position, family, freedom. But Cassandra would be safe. And in the end, that was all that mattered. He heard footsteps. Cassandra appeared in the doorway looking like she had not slept. Eyes red-rimmed, makeup, minimal suit perfectly pressed, but still conveying exhaustion. "You're here early?" she said. "So are you." Couldn't sleep, kept thinking about today, about what I'm going to say when the board asked for my resignation. Dante stood and crossed to her, took her hand same way he had done the day before. Met her eyes. "You're not going to resign. I'm going to fix this. Right now." "William, I don't think—" "My name isn't William." The words hung in the air, heavy and irrevocable. Cassandra went very still. "What? My name is Dante Vitale. I'm the Don of the Chicago family. I was sent here 3 weeks ago to protect Meridian Corporation because it's been laundering money for my organization. Everything I told you was a lie. Everything except how I feel about you." Cassandra pulled her hands away like burned, stepping back then, another face cycling through shock and betrayal and something like grief. "You're lying. I wish I was. You're—" She stopped, breath coming faster. "You're mafia. You've been lying this entire time. The contractor story, the network security, all of it was just a cover." "Yes. And Lucien, the hack, was that even real?" "It was real. Lucien works for Konstantin Volkov, a rival boss who wants to take over your company. Everything I did to protect you was real. The feelings I have for you are real. But yes, I lied about who I am." Cassandra's hand went to her mouth. Dante saw the exact moment she connected. All pieces, saw realization crash over her like a wave. "Oh my God, my father, he was a prosecutor. He put away organized crime bosses. That's why you—" "No, I didn't know about your father until days ago. I came here for the company, not for you. But then I met you and everything changed." "Get out. Cassandra, get out of my building, now, before I call security." Dante looked at her, at the woman he had destroyed, with truth, felt something break inside his chest. But he had known this would happen. Known that honesty would cost him everything. "I'm going to fix this first. Save your company and your reputation. Then I'll leave. But you need to let me do this one last thing." "Why would I trust anything you say?" "Because in about 90 minutes that boardroom fills with people who want to tear you apart. Only way to stop them is show them the truth. All of it, including the parts that will destroy me." He walked to his computer and turned the screen toward her. "This is everything. Proof that Lucien was working for Konstantin. Proof that you're innocent. Proof that Meridian was being used for money laundering without your knowledge. And a recording of Konstantin Volkov confessing to blackmail and extortion." Cassandra stared at the screen, eyes moving over data processing. "This evidence, it will save the company." "Yes, but it will expose you." "Yes, you'll go to prison." "Probably." She looked up, tears in her eyes now, but voice steady. "Why would you do this?" "Because you deserve better than being used as a pawn in someone else's war. Because your father's sins aren't yours to pay for. Because when I look at you, I see the kind of person I wish I had been brave enough to become." Dante's voice dropped to almost a whisper. And because I love you. That's real. That's the one true thing in all of this. Cassandra closed her eyes, single tear tracking down her cheek. When she opened them, her gaze was clear. Show me how to present this to the board. The boardroom filled exactly on schedule. 20-member CEO at the head, faces ranging from concerned to hostile. Emergency meeting called to discuss leadership stability and fiduciary responsibility. Corporate speak for preparing to fire Cassandra Moreau. But when Cassandra walked in, she was not alone. Dante followed 2 steps behind, carrying laptop and printed documents. Board members looked at him with confusion. William Cross was not supposed to be at executive meetings. Before we begin, Cassandra said, voice carrying full authority, wait, I need everyone to see something. William, please. Dante connected the laptop to the projector, screen filled with data, financial transactions, email logs, wire recordings, entire conspiracy laid out chronologically. 3 weeks ago, Cassandra began, Lucian Ashford initiated an illegal hack of my personal systems. What you're seeing is evidence that he was not acting alone. He was working on behalf of Konstantin Volkov, a known organized crime figure, to steal proprietary company information and to gather evidence of historical financial irregularities. Murmurs around the table. CEO leaned forward, frowning. Dante stepped forward. My name is not William Cross, it's Dante Vitale. I'm the head of the Vitale crime family, and I was sent here to protect this company's interests because Meridian Corporation has been unknowingly laundering money through shell companies established by your former CEO, Gregory Thorne, before his death. The room erupted, shouting accusations, someone reaching for a phone to call security. But Cassandra held up her hand, and somehow her presence commanded silence. Let him finish, she said. Dante played the wire recording. Constantine's voice filled the boardroom, calm and menacing, confessing to blackmail, extortion, conspiracy. Board members listened in stunned silence as the full threat scope became clear. When the recording ended, Dante spoke again. Ms. Moreau had no knowledge of the money laundering operation. She inherited a company that was already compromised, and she's been targeted because Konstantin Volkov wants to use Meridian as a weapon against my family. I have assembled all evidence and will be turning it over to federal authorities within the hour. Meridian will be investigated, but Ms. Moreau will be cleared of any wrongdoing. And you, the CEO asked, what happens to you? I'll be arrested, probably convicted, but that's not your concern. Your concern is that this company survives with its reputation intact. And the only way that happens is if you support Cassandra Moreau, who is the only person in this room who has done nothing wrong. Silence was absolute. Then one of the board members, an older woman who had been with Meridian since its founding, spoke up. I move that we give Ms. Moreau full authority to cooperate with federal investigators and to restructure the company as she sees fit. All in favor. One by one, hands rose. Not all, but enough. A majority. Cassandra's eyes met Dante's across the table, and in that look was everything they could not say aloud. Gratitude. Grief. Love that had arrived too late and burned too bright to survive. The meeting adjourned. Dante walked out of the boardroom for the last time, and he did not look back. Lorenzo was waiting in the parking garage. He stood beside Dante's car, smoking a cigarette, face carved from stone. You wearing a wire right now too? Lorenzo asked. No. Smart, because what I'm about to tell you, I'll deny it if it ever leaves this garage. Lorenzo took a long drag, then dropped the cigarette and crushed it. Your father didn't want you to be Don. Did you know that? You said he wanted to retire. He wanted more than that. He wanted to dismantle the family, transition everything to legitimate business. He had a plan. It would have taken 10 years, but he was willing to do it. For you. Because Konstantin Volkov found out. That's why he had your father killed. Not over territory, not over old grudges, because your father represented the one thing Konstantin could never accept, the idea that someone could walk away from this life and survive. So he made sure your father didn't survive. And then you became Don. And I had to watch you carry a burden your father died trying to spare you from. I told myself I was protecting you by keeping you in the family. But really I was just scared. Scared of being alone. Scared of losing the last piece of your father I had left. Lorenzo. You did the right thing, Dante. Turning over that evidence. Protecting that woman. Your father would have been proud. Lorenzo pulled an envelope from his jacket. New identity, passport, social security number, bank accounts. Everything you need to disappear. I've been preparing it for 2 years just in case. Dante stared at the envelope. You're letting me go. I'm setting you free. The family will announce that you died in the federal raid about to happen. Constantine will believe it. Everyone will believe it. You get to start over, somewhere far from Chicago, somewhere you can be just a man, not a don. What about you? I'll hold things together until dust settles, then retire for real this time. Maybe buy a boat, go fishing, die of old age instead of violence. Lorenzo's smile was sad and genuine. Go Dante, before I change my mind. They stood in silence, two men who had survived in a world designed to destroy them, saying goodbye without words. Then Dante got in his car and drove away. In the rearview mirror, he watched Lorenzo disappear into shadow, felt like he was watching his entire past recede into memory. Dante spent the next 6 months becoming someone else. The federal investigation into Meridian Corporation made national news. Konstantin Volkov arrested on multiple charges. Lucien Ashford turned state's witness. The Vitali family's money laundering exposed several low-level operators convicted. But Dante Vitali was reported dead, killed in a shootout during the initial raid. Closed casket funeral held. Newspaper obituaries published. Slowly, the world forgot he had ever existed. The man who had been Dante moved to Seattle and took the name Marcus Reed. Started a legitimate security consulting firm, helping small businesses protect their digital infrastructure. Work was honest, pay was modest, life was quiet. He did not contact Cassandra, did not call or write or send any signal he was alive, because she deserved the chance to move on to rebuild without the ghost of him haunting every decision. But he followed the news about Meridian, watched as Cassandra was promoted to CEO, read articles about her testimony before Congress, her cooperation with investigators, her complete exoneration. She became a symbol of corporate integrity, a woman who had survived a conspiracy and emerged stronger. Dante was proud of her, and he told himself that was enough. 6 months to the day after he left Chicago, there was a knock on his apartment door. Dante opened it without checking, the peephole moment of carelessness born from the illusion of safety. Cassandra Moreau stood in the hallway. She looked different. Hair shorter, clothes more casual. Jeans and simple blouse instead of executive armor. But her eyes were the same, sharp and searching and devastating. "Hi," she said. Dante could not speak, could not move, could not do anything except stare at her like she was a ghost made flesh. "Can I come in?" He stepped aside. She walked into his small apartment, looking around at sparse furniture, the minimalist lifestyle of a man still learning how to exist without constantly looking over his shoulder. "How did you find me?" Dante finally managed. "I'm very good at research, and I had help from a public defender named Mateo Reyes. He said you'd want to know I was looking." Mateo. Dante would have to thank his friend for the betrayal. Cassandra turned to face him. "I spent 6 months being angry at you, 6 months processing the fact that you lied about everything, 6 months in therapy trying to understand why I couldn't just hate you and move on. And, and I realized something. You gave up everything for me. Your name, your position, your entire life. You walked into that boardroom knowing you would lose it all, and you did it anyway. That's not something a liar does. That's something a man in love does. I am in love with you. I never lied about that." "I know." Cassandra stepped closer. "I also know that you've been alone for 6 months, that you've been living under a false name in a city where you don't know anyone, that you check the Meridian stock price every morning even though you have no stake in it anymore. I wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'm more than okay, Dante. I'm thriving. The company is clean. The board trusts me. I built something real from the ashes of what Gregory Thorne left behind." She paused. "But I'm not complete, because the man I fell in love with is living in Seattle under a fake name, and I can't stop thinking about him." Dante felt something unfold in his chest, something clenched tight for half a year. "Cassandra, I don't have anything to offer you. No power, no money, just a quiet life and a past I can never fully escape." "Good, because I don't want the Don of Chicago. I want Marcus Reed, security consultant. I want the man who stayed up all night fixing my computer. The man who remembered I like pad thai. The man who chose me over everything else." She pulled something from her pocket. A simple silver guest badge, the kind visitors received at corporate buildings. But this one had been modified, engraved with words along the bottom. "My calendar is still disorganized." Dante took the badge, fingers brushing hers, felt 6 months of loneliness lift. "I don't deserve you," he said. "Probably not, but I don't care." Cassandra stepped close enough that he could smell her perfume and see gold flecks in her eyes. "I spent my whole life doing the right thing, following the rules, being the person everyone expected me to be. And it got me nothing but loneliness and betrayal. You're the first person who ever made me feel like I could be something more than my job title. Like I could be loved for who I am, not what I represent. You are loved for exactly who you are. Then prove it. Kiss me and mean it. No lies this time, no secrets. Just you and me. Dante reached up and cupped her face into his hands. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to change her mind, to pull away, to remember all the reasons this was a terrible idea. But she did not pull away. She rose up to meet him, and when their lips touched, it had felt like coming home after a long exile. The kiss was different this time. Not tentative or careful. It was certain. It was a promise kept. It was the beginning of something neither of them had ever thought they would be allowed to have. When they finally parted, Cassandra smiled, the kind that could remake a world. I have a question, she said. What? She pulled out her phone and showed him the screen. A photo of a woman, professional, headshot, corporate background. Someone Dante did not recognize. Is she prettier than I am? Dante looked at the photo, then at Cassandra, and laughed. First genuine laugh he had allowed himself in months. Who is that? New VP of Operations. Started last month. Very accomplished. Very professional. Cassandra's eyes sparkled with mischief. I thought you should know you have competition. Dante took the phone from her hand and set it on the counter. Then he pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her waist, holding her like she was the only real thing in a world of shadows. No one compares, he said. Never did, never will. Cassandra rested her head against his chest, and they stood like that for a long time, two people who had survived impossible odds and found each other on the other side. Outside the window, Seattle rain began to fall soft and steady, washing the city clean. And in the small apartment where Marcus Reed lived his quiet life, Dante Vitale finally learned what it meant to be free. Not freedom from obligation or responsibility. Not freedom from consequence or past mistakes. But freedom to choose. Freedom to love. Freedom to build a life defined by what he wanted, not what he was owed or feared or required to protect. Cassandra stayed that night and the night after. They built slowly, carefully, learning how to trust each other without the weight of lies between them. She flew back to Chicago for work, but returned every weekend. Eventually started looking at Seattle apartments. Started talking about remote work policies in satellite offices. 3 months later, Cassandra showed up at his door with 2 suitcases and a smile. My calendar, she said, is officially relocating. They filled the apartment with her books and his sparse furniture and the comfortable chaos that came from 2 people learning to share space. They cooked together, argued about thermostats, fell asleep on the couch watching movies. Neither could remember the next morning. It was ordinary. It was beautiful. It was everything Dante had never allowed himself to dream about. And every morning when he woke up next to Cassandra, when he made coffee and kissed her goodbye and went to work, helping small businesses secure their networks, Dante Vitale was grateful. Grateful for the second chance. Grateful for the woman who had been brave enough to forgive him. Grateful for the quiet life that no one would ever know, required the sacrifice of everything he had been. Some men are born into power, some seize it, and some, the rarest ones, are wise enough to let it go. Dante had finally become the man his father had died trying to give him permission to be. Free, honest, human. And in the end, that was the only crown worth wearing.